You know what I love about emergency council meetings? The emergency part is usually manufactured, and the council part is always useless. But here I was, Ambassador Grix'tal of the Zephyrian Federation, sitting in our fancy council chamber watching a dozen species lose their collective minds over what was probably nothing more than a rogue asteroid field. The fleet has been confirmed at 200 vessels, squeaked Minister Declon, his tentacles writhing in what his species considered dignified panic. The Keltorians always did have a flair for the dramatic. They emerged from hyperspace 3 hours ago and are maintaining a direct course for the Nexus station. Oh please, 200 ships. I've seen trade convoys bigger than that, but watching the assembled diplomats flutter around like startled moths was almost entertaining enough to make this worth my time. Almost. Has anyone attempted communication? Asked Ambassador Valthek, her forearms gesturing wildly in the universal sign of I'm important and you should listen to me. The Montari were notorious for stating the obvious with authority. Negative, replied Admiral Kresh, his scaled hide turning that delightful shade of green that meant he was either terrified or constipated. They have not responded to any hails. Standard identification protocols have failed. The ships, they're not in our databases. Now that was interesting. Not because it was particularly unusual, mind you. Half the species in this galaxy couldn't be bothered to file proper ship registrations, but the way Kresh said it, with that little tremor in his voice, suggested something more. Unknown technology? I asked, leaning back in my chair with the practiced disinterest of someone who'd sat through 1,000 of these meetings. That's just it, Kresh continued, his tongue flicking nervously. The technology isn't unknown, it's familiar. But wrong somehow, like seeing your own reflection wearing someone else's face. How poetic, and how utterly unhelpful. Familiar how? Pressed Valthek, because apparently someone had to ask the obvious follow-up questions around here. The Admiral's display screen flickered to life, showing long-range sensor readings that made absolutely no sense to me. I'm a diplomat, not a technician, but even I could tell something was off about those energy signatures. The propulsion systems appear to be based on standard fusion drives, but the output levels are impossible. The hull configurations suggest mining vessels or colony ships, but they're armed like dreadnoughts. And the formation pattern. Kresh paused, his throat pouch inflating with what I assumed was professional distress. They're flying in formations that were used by the old human colonial navy. Ah, there it was. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the air recyclers and the soft clicking of Minister Declon's nervous tentacle tapping. You could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's heads as they processed that little bombshell. The humans have been gone for 50 years, I said, because apparently I was the only one willing to state facts in this room. Their colonies went dark during the Outer Rim conflicts, natural disasters, resource depletion, civil wars. Pick your favorite theory. Or, whispered Ambassador Thaxil, her crystalline features refracting the chamber's light into prismatic rainbows, they weren't as gone as we thought. Oh, how wonderfully paranoid. The Nexari always did love their conspiracy theories. Let me remind everyone, I continued, standing up because dramatic gestures were apparently contagious in this room, that we spent considerable time and resources investigating the human disappearance. Every colony world was surveyed. Every outpost was catalogued. They were gone, people, vanished, extinct, and we did what any reasonable galactic community would do with unclaimed territory. We carved it up like a holiday feast, muttered Admiral Kresh, which was surprisingly insightful for a military mind. Exactly. I spread my arms wide, encompassing the room and all its assembled guilt. The Zephyrian Federation took the mining worlds. The Keltorian Republic claimed the agricultural systems. The Montari Collective grabbed the trade route. Everyone got a piece of the human pie, and nobody complained because there were no humans left to object. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either violence or very expensive legal proceedings. Sometimes both. So what you're saying, Valthek said slowly, is that if those ships are human, then we're all in a considerable amount of trouble, I finished, settling back into my chair. But they're not human. They can't be human. Because humans are extinct, and extinct species don't build fleets of 200 ships that make our military advisors wet themselves. Admiral Grix'tal's throat pouch deflated completely. Ambassador Grix'tal? Yes? Our long-range scanners just updated the count. It's not 200 ships. I felt that familiar tingle in my spinal ridge that usually preceded very bad news. How many? 2,000. And counting. Well, that was inconvenient. 2 hours later, I was seriously considering a career change. Maybe something quiet and peaceful, like explosive ordnance disposal, or diplomatic relations with the Hive Mind Collective. Anything that didn't involve staring at the main view screen while 2,000 human warships arranged themselves in a formation that looked suspiciously like a noose around Nexus Station. "They're beautiful," whispered Ambassador Grix'tal, her crystalline features reflecting the sleek lines of the approaching fleet. "Trust an XRE to find aesthetics in potential annihilation." Beautiful wasn't the word I would have chosen. Terrifying, maybe. Elegant in the way a perfectly designed weapon was elegant. Each ship was a masterwork of engineering that made our own vessels look like they'd been assembled by enthusiastic children with spare parts. "Still no response to our hails," reported Admiral Grix'tal, though his voice had gained that wonderful quality of someone trying very hard not to sound like they were about to wet themselves. "But they've started broadcasting." "Broadcasting what?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. "Music." Of course they were, because nothing said "we come in peace" quite like a soundtrack to your potential doom. "What kind of music?" Velthek demanded, as if the genre would somehow determine our survival chances. "Classical human compositions. Something called The Ride of the Valkyries followed by We Are the Champions. Our cultural database suggests these might be significant choices." Oh, they were significant all right. The first was battle music. The second was what you played after you won. I was beginning to develop a healthy respect for human psychological warfare. Then the main screen flickered, and everything changed. The woman who appeared was not what I expected from a species we'd written off as extinct primitives. She was sitting in what appeared to be a command chair that looked like it cost more than most planetary defense budgets. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that was both practical and somehow regal. Her uniform was crisp, military, and bore insignia that screamed authority. But it was her eyes that made my spinal ridge tingle with warning. They were the eyes of someone who had seen terrible things, done terrible things, and had made peace with both. "Greetings," she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded storms. "I am Queen Elena Vasquez of the Terran Colonial Empire. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but we've been somewhat out of touch." The silence in our council chamber was so complete I could hear Minister Declan's hearts beating. All three of them. "Your Majesty," I said, standing because diplomacy demanded it even when diplomacy was probably futile. "I am Ambassador Grix'tal of the Zephyrian Federation. We were not aware that any human colonies had survived." Her smile was polite, pleasant, and absolutely terrifying. "Oh, we survived, Ambassador. We thrived, actually. 50 years of isolation does wonderful things for technological development when you have the proper motivation." "Proper motivation?" squeaked Minister Declan, apparently forgetting that nervous squeaking was not considered dignified diplomatic discourse. "Revenge," she said simply, as if discussing the weather. "Or justice, depending on your perspective. I prefer justice. It sounds more civilized." Admiral Grix'tal cleared his throat, a sound that came out more like a strangled wheeze. "Your Majesty, there seems to be some misunderstanding. The human colonies were lost due to natural disasters and internal conflicts. We have extensive records." "Oh, I'm sure you do." Queen Elena's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Extensive records of how quickly you moved to claim our worlds after we went dark. Very thorough documentation of the resource extraction operations. Quite detailed reports on the redistribution of our trade routes." She paused, consulting what appeared to be a datapad with the casual air of someone reading a shopping list. "Let me see. The Zephyrian Federation claimed 14 mining worlds and 2 industrial complexes. The Kaltorian Republic took control of 8 agricultural systems. The Montari Collective acquired rights to 6 major trade lanes. Should I continue? Your Majesty, Valthek interjected, her 4 arms gesturing in what her species considered a gesture of peaceful intent. Those territories were abandoned. Standard galactic law allows for... Standard galactic law, Elena interrupted, requires a minimum waiting period of 75 years before claiming abandoned territory. You waited 18 months. The accuracy of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. I watched as every diplomat present suddenly developed a fascination with their own feet, tentacles or equivalent appendages. There were exceptional circumstances, I said, because someone had to try salvaging this disaster. The Outer Rim conflicts created unique situations that required immediate stabilization efforts. Yes, the Outer Rim conflicts. Elena's smile widened, becoming something that would have looked at home on a predator. The conflicts that began with coordinated attacks on our communication networks. The conflicts that cut our colonies off from each other and from the core worlds. The conflicts that left us isolated, presumed dead and ripe for plundering. She leaned forward slightly, and I felt every survival instinct I'd inherited from my carnivorous ancestors screaming at me to run. Tell me, Ambassador Grix'tal, do you believe in coincidences? I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly drier than a Kaltorian desert. Your Majesty, I think there may be some misunderstanding about... Oh, there's no misunderstanding. Her voice remained conversational, friendly even. We know exactly what happened. We know who was involved. We know who profited. And now we're here to collect. The view screen behind her flickered, showing the human fleet in all its terrible glory. 2,000 ships, each one a masterpiece of destruction, arranged in perfect formation around our station. But don't worry, Elena continued, her tone brightening as if she'd just remembered something pleasant. We're not unreasonable people. We're prepared to discuss terms. Somehow I didn't think we were going to like those terms. But first, Queen Elena said, settling back in her chair with the air of someone about to tell a bedtime story, let me share a little history. I do so enjoy history, don't you? All those fascinating cause and effect relationships. I was developing a very strong dislike for the way she said fascinating. It was the same tone my grandmother used right before she'd reveal which of my cousins had been caught stealing from the food stores. 52 years ago, Elena began, I was 7 years old, living on New Terra with my parents and about 40,000 other colonists. Lovely place. Rolling hills, perfect climate, rich mineral deposits, the kind of world that makes other species envious. Her fingers drummed against her armrest in a rhythm that somehow managed to sound ominous. We were having communication problems, you see. Our long-range transmitters kept failing. Very mysterious. Our supply ships stopped arriving on schedule. Also mysterious. And then we started receiving reports of pirate attacks on other human colonies. Quite the epidemic of piracy, wasn't it, Ambassador Grix'tal? The way she said my name made my scales itch. Your Majesty, I wasn't involved in Outer Rim security during that period. Oh, but your government was. Her smile could have cut steel. The Zephyrian Federation provided security consulting services to several sectors, including the sectors where human colonies just happened to be experiencing these unfortunate communication failures. Minister Declon's tentacles had stopped their nervous tapping and gone completely still. That was never a good sign with Kaltorians. Meanwhile, Admiral Kresh was making soft whimpering sounds that his translator was politely rendering as tactical assessment updates. The attacks came 3 months later, Elena continued, her voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting well-rehearsed facts. Coordinated strikes on 17 human colonies simultaneously. Very professional work, the kind that requires extensive intelligence, precise timing, and insider knowledge of our defense systems. Your Majesty, Valthek interrupted. Surely you're not suggesting... Oh, I'm not suggesting anything. Elena's laugh was like breaking glass. I'm stating facts. Would you like to see the evidence? We spent decades piecing it together. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have nothing but time and a burning desire for answers. The main screen behind her changed, displaying what appeared to be communication logs, shipping manifests, and tactical reports. Even from where I sat, I could see familiar Zephyrian military codes in the data streams. The communications disruption was caused by targeted electromagnetic pulse weapons, deployed by ships using Zephyrian stealth technology. The supply disruptions were the result of deliberate route changes, coordinated through Keltorian shipping cartels, and the final attacks. She paused, letting the silence stretch like a tightening noose. Those were carried out by mercenary fleets funded through Montari banking networks. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I watched as three major galactic powers simultaneously realized they were looking at their own digital fingerprints on a 50-year-old genocide. But here's the beautiful part, Elena continued, her tone brightening as if she'd just remembered a particularly amusing joke. You didn't quite finish the job. I don't understand, croaked Admiral Grix'tal, though from his expression I suspected he was beginning to understand all too well. 7 colonies survived the initial attacks. 7 out of 43. We were scattered, isolated, cut off from each other, and from the core worlds. You left us for dead. Her eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement if it weren't so terrifying. That was your mistake. She stood up, and even through the hologram, her presence filled our council chamber. Do you know what happens when you take a species known for its adaptability, its stubbornness, and its tendency toward creative problem-solving, and then trap them in impossible circumstances with a strong motivation for survival? None of us answered. I don't think any of us were capable of speech at that point. You get innovation, Elena said simply. Rapid, desperate, brilliant innovation. Within 10 years we'd developed faster-than-light communications that couldn't be jammed. Within 20 we'd perfected manufacturing techniques that let us build fleets from asteroid debris. Within 30 we'd unified under a single government with a very specific set of priorities. And what priorities were those? I asked, though I was fairly certain I didn't want to know the answer. Survival, expansion, and justice for 43 lost colonies. She returned to her chair, but somehow managed to make sitting down look like a threat. I was that 7-year-old girl on New Terra, Ambassador. I watched my world burn. I watched my parents die defending an evacuation that came too late. I spent my childhood as a refugee, my adolescence as a soldier, and my adulthood building an empire dedicated to one simple principle. Which is, whispered Minister Declon, never again. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft beeping of our station's life support systems. It occurred to me that those beeps sounded remarkably like a countdown. The humans you thought you eliminated 50 years ago, Elena continued, have become something new, something stronger, something that learned from your betrayal and grew beyond it. We call ourselves the Terran Colonial Empire now, and we span 47 star systems across 3 galactic arms. 47 systems? Valthek's voice cracked slightly. But that's impossible. The surveys showed what we wanted them to show. Elena's smile returned, and I was beginning to hate that smile with a passion that surprised me. Stealth technology, remember? We learned it from the best. Amazing how quickly you can expand when nobody knows you're expanding. Admiral Grix'tal was frantically consulting his tactical displays, and from his expression, he was not liking what he found. Your Majesty, our long-range scanners are detecting additional ships entering the system. Ah yes, the rest of the fleet. They should be arriving any moment now. Elena glanced at something off-screen. Actually, they're here now. All 8,000 of them. I felt my heart skip several beats. 8,000 ships. 8,000 human warships, commanded by a species that had spent 50 years perfecting the art of survival and the science of revenge. Now then, Elena said, folding her hands in her lap like a teacher about to begin a lesson, shall we discuss reparations? The word reparations hung in the air like a death sentence. I'd heard it used in diplomatic contexts before, usually right before wars started or governments fell, sometimes both. Your Majesty, I began, desperately trying to summon whatever diplomatic skills had gotten me this far in life. Surely we can reach some sort of mutually beneficial arrangement. Oh, we absolutely can, Elena agreed. her tone so cheerful it made my spine want to crawl out through my ears. "I'm nothing if not reasonable. In fact, I've prepared a very generous offer." She gestured, and the main screen filled with what appeared to be a formal treaty document. The kind with lots of clauses, sub-clauses, and the sort of legal language that usually preceded the end of civilizations. The Terran colonial empire is prepared to offer full amnesty to all parties involved in the systematic elimination of human colonies, provided certain conditions are met. "Amnesty?" repeated Minister Declon, his tentacles brightening with what might have been hope. That's very generous of you, Your Majesty. Isn't it? I'm practically overflowing with generosity today. Elena's smile could have powered a small star. Now the conditions are quite simple. First, all territories formerly belonging to human colonies will be returned to Terran control within 30 standard days. The silence that followed was the kind you usually heard right before explosions. "All territories?" croaked Admiral Kresh. "Your Majesty, some of those worlds have been developed for decades. There are established populations, infrastructure investments. Yes, it's wonderful what can be accomplished with stolen resources. Isn't it?" Elena's voice remained pleasant, conversational. "We'll be sure to send thank you notes for all the improvements. Very thoughtful of you to maintain our property for us." "But the populations," Velfek protested, her forearms gesturing frantically. "There are billions of sentients living on those worlds now. You can't just relocate them." "Of course we can. We're not monsters." Elena leaned forward slightly. "We'll provide transportation to suitable alternative locations. At our convenience, naturally." I felt a cold certainty settling in my stomach like a particularly unpleasant meal. "And if we refuse these generous terms, then we proceed to condition 2, Elena said brightly. "Military occupation of all territories, formerly belonging to human colonies, plus compensation zones equivalent to 50% of each claiming party's remaining territorial holdings." The mathematical implications of that hit me like a plasma bolt to the face. 50% of the Zephyrian Federation's territory, half of our mining worlds, our trade routes, our industrial centers. It would be economic suicide. "Your Majesty," I said carefully, "that would effectively cripple our governments." "Yes," she agreed with the enthusiasm of someone discussing their favorite hobby. "That's rather the point. Think of it as a learning experience. Character building." Minister Declon was making small whimpering sounds that his translator was struggling to render into standard galactic. And if we refuse that option as well?" Elena's expression didn't change, but somehow the quality of her smile shifted from merely terrifying to absolutely apocalyptic. "Then we proceed to condition 3, total war, followed by unconditional surrender." She gestured again, and the screen showed tactical displays that made my blood turn to ice water. Fleet positions, weapon configurations, and targeting solutions that covered every major population center in 3-star systems. "Just to demonstrate our commitment to negotiation," Elena continued, "allow me to provide a small preview of Condition 3. The screen switched to an external view of Nexus Station. I watched in fascinated horror as a single human ship, sleek and predatory, detached itself from the main fleet. It was smaller than our station, maybe a tenth the size, but something about its movement patterns suggested it was not to be underestimated. "The TCS Retribution is our smallest destroyer-class vessel," Elena explained helpfully. "She's about to demonstrate our standard ship-to-station engagement protocol." "Demonstration?" I squeaked, my voice reaching octaves I didn't know I was capable of. "Oh, don't worry. We're not going to hurt anyone. We're just going to turn off your lights." The Retribution fired once, a single pulse of energy that looked almost gentle, like a firefly's flash in the darkness of space. It struck the station's main power grid, and suddenly we were sitting in emergency lighting while backup systems struggled to come online. "Impressive, isn't it?" Elena asked, as normal lighting returned. That was approximately 0.01% of the Retribution's offensive capability. She has 743 sister ships in the immediate area. The math was simple and terrible. If one ship could disable our station's main power grid with a casual shot, What could 8,000 ships do to an entire civilization? You have 48 hours to provide your response, Elena announced, standing up with the fluid grace of someone who had never doubted the outcome of a negotiation. I do hope you'll choose wisely. It would be such a shame to damage all those lovely worlds we'll be inheriting. Your Majesty, Valthek said desperately, surely we can negotiate the timeline. 48 hours isn't enough time to what? Organize a defense. Elena's laugh was like the sound of breaking crystal. Oh my dear Ambassador, there is no defense. There is only the choice between dignity and destruction. The hologram flickered, and for a moment I thought she was ending the transmission. Instead she leaned forward one last time. And gentlemen, ladies, various distinguished sentients, don't even think about trying to run. We've been tracking every ship in this system since we arrived. Anyone who attempts to leave without permission will be considered a hostile act. The transmission ended, leaving us staring at a blank screen and the sound of our own rapidly beating hearts. Well, I said into the silence, that could have gone better. 47 hours and 36 minutes later, I was sitting in what used to be my office, watching the galaxy restructure itself in real time. Amazing how quickly 50 years of political stability could evaporate when faced with 8,000 warships and a queen who treated galactic conquest like a particularly engaging board game. The responses had been varied. The Keltorian Republic, bless their cowardly little hearts, had surrendered within 6 hours. Minister Declon personally delivered their acceptance of Elena's terms along with a formal apology, a comprehensive list of human artifacts they'd been hoarding, and what appeared to be his government's entire strategic database. Nothing like complete capitulation to really demonstrate diplomatic flexibility. The Montari Collective had lasted 18 hours before folding like a house of cards in a solar storm. Valthek's final transmission had been a masterpiece of political backpedaling, claiming they'd always intended to return human territories and had simply been waiting for the proper moment. The proper moment apparently being when 8,000 human ships appeared on their doorstep with hostile intent. The Zephyrian Federation, my own beloved government, had chosen the path of defiant stupidity. We will not bow to terrorist demands, Chancellor Grix'tal had declared in his emergency broadcast to the fleet. The Zephyrian Federation stands strong against this unprovoked aggression. I'd actually laughed out loud at that point, unprovoked. Right, because systematic genocide was apparently just good business, but responding to it 50 years later was terrorism. The Chancellor's defiance had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. That's how long it took for 12 human ships to reduce the Grix'tal system defense fleet to constituent atoms. Not disabled, not captured, vaporized. 800 ships and their crews, gone in less time than it takes to order lunch. The surrender came 43 seconds later. Now I was sitting in my former office, watching human ships take control of what used to be Zephyrian space, and marveling at the cosmic irony of it all. The species we'd dismissed as primitive had just demonstrated technology that made our most advanced weapons look like pointed sticks. My door chimed, which was surprising since I'd been expecting to be arrested, executed, or worse. Instead, a human officer walked in, young, professional, and wearing a uniform that probably cost more than my annual salary. Ambassador Grix'tal, she said, consulting a datapad. I'm Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Colonial Navy. Her Majesty would like a word. Because of course she would. The hologram that appeared in my office was the same Queen Elena I had met 48 hours ago, but somehow she seemed even more formidable in my cramped personal space. Probably the knowledge that she now owned everything I could see from my window. Ambassador, she said pleasantly, I wanted to personally thank you for your government's spirited response to our negotiations. Your Majesty is too kind, I replied, because sarcasm was apparently all I had left. Oh, I'm famous for my kindness. Ask anyone. Her smile was the same one she'd worn while casually dismantling galactic civilization. I also wanted to let you know that your new posting has been approved. New posting? The Terran Colonial Empire requires experienced diplomatic personnel for our expanding bureaucracy. Your knowledge of pre-contact galactic politics will be invaluable in our integration efforts. I stared at her for a long moment, processing the implications. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance to be useful. The alternative is early retirement to a very small, very isolated colony world where the primary entertainment is counting rocks. It wasn't really a choice. Then again, nothing had been a choice since those 8,000 ships arrived. What would my duties entail? You'll be our liaison to the former Zephyrian territories. Help smooth the transition to new management. Explain to the locals why their new human administrators aren't quite as unreasonable as their previous government. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. After 50 years of my people exploiting human territories, I was going to spend my remaining years helping humans manage what used to be ours. I accept, I said, because the alternative was counting rocks. Excellent. Commander Chen will provide you with your new credentials and a briefing package. Try not to be too depressed about it all, Ambassador. You're witnessing history. What kind of history, Your Majesty? Elena's expression grew thoughtful, almost philosophical. The kind where justice arrives late but carries a very large stick. The kind where consequences catch up to their causes after everyone thought they'd gotten away with it. The kind where a species that was supposed to be extinct gets to rewrite the rules. The hologram flickered, and for a moment she looked less like a conquering queen and more like that 7-year-old girl who'd watched her world burn. We didn't start this war, Ambassador, but we're certainly going to finish it. The transmission ended, leaving me alone with Commander Chen and the sound of human ships in my sky. 6 months later, I was filing reports from the newly designated Terran Administrative Zone 12, formerly known as the Zephyrian Home System. The humans, I had to admit, were surprisingly efficient administrators. They'd restored order, rebuilt damaged infrastructure, and established trade relationships that actually benefited the local populations. They were also absolutely ruthless to anyone who so much as thought about rebellion. But here's the thing about cosmic justice. It doesn't care about your political affiliations, your species' proud history, or your previous diplomatic immunity. It only cares about accounts being settled. And after 50 years of compound interest, the bill had finally come due. The humans were back. And this time, they were in charge. Personally, I thought it served us right.